Good afternoon, beautiful people. Today I'm going to be talking to you about what I've been doing in my week. I'm going to be reading to you from the Bible and ever attempting to explain what I'm reading or just responding to what I'm reading. On Monday, I went to Redcliffe War Memorial Pool. I got to talk with Amara. She asked me what I did during my week. I didn't answer. I just talked to her about the weather. That was definitely a missed opportunity. Hopefully, she won't consider me too rude to converse with, or it will build a wall between us. I had Elaine all to myself. That was off the chain. I don't mind sharing a lane, but it's better when I've got my own space. I talked to my buddy D. I didn't really tell her what I'd been doing in my week either. I found out that she likes country music. I don't know what other kinds of music she likes. The music I gave her was on the fence between country and jazz, so it had a fairly wide appeal. I was talking to her about the fruit and vegetable place I go to. I didn't even know if she was into fruits and vegetables, but she seemed keen to listen to me. Of course, she's paid to be polite, but people can still choose to put up a wall to a certain extent when they're in customer services. She's got a warm heart though. Last week I was served by Hayden. It's kind of tricky to get the bathroom when a cleaner isn't using it. I don't know why people are asked to socially distance in bathrooms, or why limits are imposed upon bathrooms. It seems kind of ridiculous when you've got a big team and you need to get them changed and showered and refreshed and using the toilet facilities in a hurry. Or if you have a mother's group and you have a whole bunch of babies that need breastfeeding and need their nappies changed, it's kind of frustrating if you have to wait because there's less than 20 people allowed in the bathroom area. I pray that will change. I didn't have anybody encouraging me while I was swimming, but there was lots of friendly faces. It's kind of sweet when people see each other when they haven't seen each other in ages, because since last year people tend to get out and about less than they used to. It's been years since we've actually needed to leave our homes, because you can get fruits and vegetables and all manner of food and drink delivered to your door. But a lot of people just get out and about because socializing keeps you from going stir crazy, or gives you someone you can share your craziness with, or other people's perception of you as crazy, or what other people perceive of you as being crazy. Definitely fighting our issues together makes it easier than if we're struggling on our own, and we never have to feel abandoned because God's with us in our struggles. He's enabling us to overcome the world. On Tuesday, I went to the city and saw a concert at Brisbane City Concert Hall. It was called Tango Enigmatico. They had a double bass cello player, a violinist, an opera singer, a couple doing the tango dancing. That was pretty enthralling. I was amused whenever I heard this cello player strike a particularly quirky note, and the tango dancer responded by spinning her leg as if the instrument was controlling her motions. The lifts that her partner did were quite incredible. I loved the way he was supporting his partner, how he was using his strength to make her shine bright. It's a good Christian lesson in how couples dancing act, how the guy always acts humble and makes his woman shine bright. That's how we should be, giving all the glory that we gain in this life to God our Father and or our Maker, instead of trying to steal the glory for ourselves. I got to see Trent Dalton again. He wrote a book called Love Stories. It features my life, or part of my life, as well as other people's lives. I'm gonna read an extract from it. It was in a section called Two Poets. He says, then Minus the Cynic pulls from his JB Hi-Fi bag a book of his poetry that's 200 pages long. A4 pages bound together like something he had printed off his works. Clear plastic front cover, blue cardboard back page. He hands me the book as a gift. Legend, he says. God bless you. Then he rushes away towards City Hall and I flip through the poetry book. There is exactly 200 poems in the book, but the poems have been written in near microscopic sub-8-point font. The book feels like it would be 600 pages long in legible font. They are love poems, many of them beautiful, with long titles and breakneck sentence rhythms. They speak of a man carrying a broken heart who perhaps tried to unconditionally love someone very special, but had to settle for loving that person just as a friend. It's pure, heartfelt heartbreak writing. Minus the ego, minus the fear, minus the cynic. The tiny font size only adds to the mystery held within the poem titles. Keep my heart locked in yours and throw away the key. Just for once pretend that all I've got to offer is more than enough for you. Turn on the light of love in me and let it never go to sleep. Does this actually go somewhere other than pear-shaped? Our words are always made love in better ways than our bodies ever could. You know how it is when you anticipate breakups before they happen, so you deliberately sabotage your relationship to save face. That number you give when you want to get rid of someone who wants to be your lover, but you'd rather not bother with them, but don't want to hurt feelings. So, I was blessed by God with the opportunity to meet this guy. He's got a play called Boy Swallows Universe, which is right now at QPAC. I won't be attending because it's got swearing, but I love the fact that they point people in the direction of those who can help them when they're facing issues related to domestic violence, which is what the play and the book covers. He said that my poem titles are bleeping awesome. I praise God for His goodness and His favor and His faithfulness. It's awesome to see somebody whose career is soaring, who has a heart of gold and sees goodness in just about everyone he meets. On Wednesday, I went to Serenity Cafe on Bribie Island. Ed wasn't there. They had a guitarist called Jay. He went to where the Rolling Stones had their first gig in London in the UK. He likes to play Ray Charles music. He was pretending that he'd written some songs that he hadn't written. He kept saying he was going to give us an original, but he never did. He played songs by the Kinks. He gave us a little history on the artists he was covering. It's funny because he was saying you probably don't know these artists because you're too young, and I do know them because I grew up in a household where they were played fairly frequently, or I'd seen them being covered by other artists. He taught me lyrics to songs I thought I knew, but only half knew, or only knew the chorus of. I had a bacon and egg muffin with hash browns, extra cheese and garlic aioli sauce, and a large caramel latte. I always forget to ask for no milk and no sugar. I mean full cream milk and no sugar. There's a new waitress there named Taj. I only got to interact with her briefly. She's got brown skin and glasses. She seems to have a fairly sweet spirit. I didn't really interact with Jay much other than listening to his music. He also plays the harmonica. Ed's still alive and breathing. There was a house fire in Bribie Island last week, but thank God it wasn't my friend Ed. I don't know if anyone was hurt in that fire. I didn't make my inquiries. All the people that I know and love who come regularly didn't have any accidents or injuries as a result of the fire. Hopefully no one was injured in the fire. We could smell it all over our neighborhood. It was kind of freaky when it happened. I was less perturbed that our afternoon walk was spoiled and more concerned about what was happening in the house that was burned or the location where the fire took place. We've had fires that were close to us before, but they've never actually come in our house. They've come at the back of our house in a high school where we used to be located a couple of houses ago. It was interesting to hear a guy do his own versions of familiar songs. I probably would have preferred to hear them done in the original way, but I still thought it was off the chain that he was being creative and experimental and giving us faster versions of familiar songs. You could still recognize them. He was clearly a man who'd been to many places and he had a deep love of music. He was spectacled and he had an Aboriginal flag on his guitar, so that impressed me because I love Aboriginal people, and I didn't find out exactly why he happened to have that sticker, but I just thought it was off the chain that he has respect for the native people of this land. I'm sure there's a long history there because he loves African American music, so it's possible that he has quite a close connection with Indigenous people, just like Ray does. On Thursday, I went horse riding at Bribie Island Road Saddle Club. I sometimes stand up on a horse and take my feet out of the stirrups. I've ridden Sweaty backwards before. That was pretty freaky. We went down to the creek. There wasn't any water in the creek, so my handler didn't have to worry about getting her feet wet. I found out that she's done magic tricks as part of her Christmas get-together with her family. She ran out of the room she was in into another room quicker than anyone could spot her, and she rushed back. She likes watching this show about magicians revealing their tricks, which has a masked figure in the same kind of mask that they use for V for Vendetta. This guy's name is Anonymous. It's possible that he's gotten a lot of death threats because people don't like it when you reveal their tricks unless they give their permission. David Copperfield has been pretty open about how he does what he does to a certain extent. There's probably some things he's never going to reveal. My trainer Katie's still waiting for her saddle to come from people that are making a custom one for her. She always has a tree cut from the woods by her brother and her father. They have multiple trees. They alternate between Boxing Day and Christmas for their family get-togethers. We've never had a family get-together, not in a good 20 years or 30 years, not with our extended family. The last time we had one with our immediate family was 7 years ago. I look at how this one guy in the States calls his Christmas trees Jesus' birthday trees. So he's using Christmas trees to share the gospel because it gets people thinking. It actually has been proven that Jesus was 1 year old on December the 25th. So it's legit to celebrate it as his birthday, just not the day of his birth. My support worker was enthralled with the ponies. She got to have an up close and personal encounter with them. I had to brush all of Sweetie's hooves this week, but it wasn't so much of a chore as it is sometimes because there wasn't much rain, so she didn't have any mud or poo or large clumps of grass sticking to her hooves. She's always a pleasure to ride. She's got a real sweet nature. Sometimes she takes a while to get going, but when she does, she's astounding because, in my view, she goes as fast as lightning. If you're a horse racer, you might disagree, but she can definitely get up a gallop in a hurry. I'm sure she might have won a few races in her time if she'd have ever been a racing horse, but she never was. On Friday, my art therapist came. She helped me finish off my box. I did a spider and Christmas beetles. My spider was barely visible, so I had to go over it several times. I thought it was a cool idea that my spider might have been hidden from the Christmas beetles, which explains why they came along and decided to take over the web. But as much as I liked that story, I really wanted to make my spider visible, so I went for something obvious instead of something you have to strain your eyes to see. I never meant for my spider to be barely visible. It's just that I didn't quite put as much yellow paint on the area of the box that she was on as I intended to, or not enough to make her visible, because the paint seemed to be ghosting on me like textures do. It took me years to discover that when you write a message on Texter, it's not permanent, so if you want something that you've written down to be kept forever, type it up in your computer or use a pencil or a pen. Don't use textures. They look beautiful, but they don't last. I've written messages with chalk. They last if you preserve them, but it has to be in a way where you can't have a sheet of paper resting against another sheet of paper, which means that you have to purchase a lot of plastic sheets or manila folders, which can get expensive. My art therapist's brother has been struggling with the fact that he can't get married, although it's sweet that his girlfriend's son calls him daddy, so it's like he's already got an instant family, but he wants to celebrate their love for the eyes of the world to see. The only reason he can't at the moment is because of restrictions that are in place in Melbourne and Victoria. They're experiencing a social media blackout right now, so they can't talk about things that are happening in the world. I don't know if they can do it through email, but they can't do it through social media, which really stinks. I pray that will change. God, I know. You can make the impossible possible. You can intervene in the situation. It's possible that the Victorian government is threatened by the protests that took place as a result of the construction industry deciding to get together and resist the call by the government that they wouldn't be allowed on construction sites unless they had a jab with a COVID-19 needle. Nobody should be forced into getting a jab against their will. Some of my art therapists' families have been divided. One has in particular over wearing masks. My art therapist knows a client who had a music therapist who plays the drums. He was too regimental for his client though, because the purpose of him being at his client's place was to calm his nerves and bring him joy, but he ended up triggering him instead because he was way too bossy, so the whole point of his being there was shot in the foot, and his lessons were pretty much counterintuitive. My art therapist's grandson was stoked with his Thomas the Tank Engine cake and his Thomas the Tank Engine pillow. He was supposed to wait until they were done eating before he opened one present, but he was just too keen, so they had to stop in the middle of eating and let him have his present. He loves playing with his trains. My arch-therapist was pretty stoked seeing where her brother lived. He lives on the Sunshine Coast. They're building a lot of new houses there at the moment. It's becoming very popular for people because it's nice and peaceful, close to the beach, and plenty of space. My mum's old hairdresser is living in the country now. She was a city girl. Where we live is the city, but it's also close to the beach, so it's kind of like we got the best of both worlds. Some people like the wide open spaces of the country. I'm one of those people. I'm happy where I am though. Today I got some fruits and vegetables at Simon's place on Lamington Drive at Redcliffe Showgrounds. I didn't get any freebies this week. He sells eggs. The plants that he usually that he was planning to sell haven't come yet, but they're on their way. You can get fruits and vegetables there every Saturday between 9 AM and 1 noon. I felt sorry for him because he had to let go of his worker. He's got a new worker on the way. It's sad when you try and help people but they refuse to be helped. Sometimes this is because of the way you approach helping them, and other times it's just because they would prefer to just continue to live their lives and continue acting in self-destructive ways or unproductive ways rather than taking good advice and listening to wisdom. I've been one of those people in the past. This week I needed a wake-up call. I thank God for my subscriber Christiana and her advice to me, telling me to stay close to God. It was definitely the wake-up call that I needed, because I felt myself drifting away. It's not that I was overwhelmed with despair by the situation of the world or where I'm at right now, but I was just lured by the love of a woman or the lust of a woman who already has a boyfriend, who lives on the other side of the world, who raps and plays games and likes some things that I do. Even after my blocking her on several social media sites, she's still gracious to me, and she's willing to take me back as a friend. So I'm grateful to God for the nature of God that's present in her. I want her to change and not be into tarot cards, but I praise God that she's into spirituality. I hope in her search it will lead to knowing Adonai, that it will lead to the peace and joy that I've got in my heart because I'm Christ's boy. I'm grateful that she's showing a less exploitative presentation of herself to the world. She's being more modest in how she presents herself. She's seeing value in joining a site where she gets paid to be modest and not show her cleavage and not smoke. I'm glad those sites exist. I love people regardless of whether they smoke or show their cleavage, but It's awesome to see people respecting themselves and rocking with modesty. I'm gonna be reading to you from Exodus 8. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go into Pharaoh and tell him, this is what the Lord says. Let my people go, so that they may worship me. But if you refuse to let them go, then I will plague your territory with frogs. The Nile will swarm with frogs. They will come up and go into your palace, into your bedroom, and on your bed, into the houses of your officials and your people, and into your ovens and kneading bowls. The frogs will come up on you, your people, and all your officials." The Lord then said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, stretch out your hand with your staff over the rivers, canals, and ponds, and cause the frogs to come up onto the land of Egypt." When Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. But the magicians did the same thing by their occult practices and brought frogs up onto the land of Egypt. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Appeal to the Lord to remove the frogs from me and my people. Then I will let the people go and they can sacrifice to the Lord." Moses said to Pharaoh, "You may have the honor of choosing when should I appear on behalf of you, your officials, and your people, that the frogs be taken away from you and your houses and remain only in the Nile." "Tomorrow," he answered. Moses replied, "As you have said, so that you may know that there is no one like the Lord our God. The frogs will go away from you, your houses, your officials, and your people. The frogs will remain only in the Nile." After Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh, Moses cried out to the Lord for help concerning the frogs that he had brought against Pharaoh. The Lord did as Moses had said. The frogs in the houses, courtyards, and fields died. They piled them in countless heaps, and there was a terrible odor in the land. But when Pharaoh saw there was relief he had in his heart and would not listen to them as the Lord had said, then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, stretch out your staff and strike the dust of the land, and it will become gnats throughout the land of Egypt." And they did this. Moses stretched out his hand with his staff, and when he struck the dust of the land, gnats were on people and animals. All the dust of the land became gnats throughout the land of Egypt. The magicians tried to produce gnats using their occult practices, but they could not. The gnats remained on people and animals. "This is the finger of God," the magician said to Pharaoh, but Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he would not listen to them, as the Lord had said. The Lord said to Moses, "Get up early in the morning and present yourself to Pharaoh when you see him going out into the water. Tell him, this is what the Lord says. Let my people go so that they may worship me. But if you will not let my people go, then I will send swarms of flies against you, your officials, your people, and your houses. The Egyptians' houses will swarm with flies, and so will the land where they live. But on that day I will give special treatment to the land of Goshen, where my people are living. No flies will be there. This way you will know that I, the Lord, am in the land. I'll make a distinction between my people and your people. This time will take place tomorrow." And the Lord did this. Thick swarms of flies went into Pharaoh's palace and his officials' houses. Throughout Egypt the land was ruined because of the swarms of flies. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Go sacrifice to your God within the country." But Moses said, "It would not be right to do that, because what we will sacrifice to the Lord our God is detestable to the Egyptians. If we sacrifice what the Egyptians detest in front of them when they stone us, we must go a distance of 3 days into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he instructs us." Pharaoh responded, "I will let you go and sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness, but don't go very far. Make an appeal for me. As soon as I leave you," Moses said, "I will appeal to the Lord, and tomorrow the swarms of flies will depart from Pharaoh, his officials, and his people." But Pharaoh must not act deceptively again by refusing to let the people go and sacrifice to the Lord. Then Moses left Pharaoh's presence and appealed to the Lord. The Lord did as Moses had said. He removed the swarms of flies from Pharaoh, his officials, and his people. Not one was left. But Pharaoh hardened his heart this time also, and did not let the people go. Imagine Moses standing before Pharaoh. I can imagine that he would have been trembling a whole heap. It's incredible to think the boldness he had, when Pharaoh could have killed him in a heartbeat. It must have been awesome to see Aaron stretching out his hand and seeing frogs appear all over the place. I can't imagine Aaron and everyone watching him would have been freaked out. The magicians had confidence that this was going to be a cinch for them to be able to copycat what God had done. What they didn't realize was that it wasn't by praying to devils that they got what they wanted. It was just God revealing his power through them, even though they were sending their prayers in the wrong direction. You can see why Pharaoh was sick of having Frogs everywhere. You can imagine all these Egyptians stumbling over frogs everywhere they turned. Waking up and having frogs in your bed, having frogs in the shower, having frogs in your swimming pool. Would it drive them balmy? It's interesting that Pharaoh chose to have frogs removed from him the day after he was plagued with them. You'd think he would want to get rid of them straight away. The frogs didn't go straight away. They were in the Nile initially before they disappeared. We can only presume that the frogs that were in the Nile just died of natural causes, or they just failed to be a problem for people. Apart from the big stinking pile of frogs that was everywhere, that would have been a pain for people. They would have had to dig heaps of holes to get rid of the frogs. It's possible that they would have still been cleaning up frogs when God allowed another plague to come against Egypt. It's interesting that the gnats were a stumbling block for the magicians. God permitted them to cause frogs to appear, but he stopped them in their tracks when they tried to give glory to devils for the appearance of gnats. We don't know what they would have used to try and make these gnats appear. It's interesting that God told Moses to come to Pharaoh when he was bathing. I don't know if Pharaoh would have been in a calmer mood or a more disturbed mood if he'd have just had his swim in the Nile. Or if he was just about to have a swim. Imagine the shock of Pharaoh and the Egyptians when they saw that flies were everywhere in Egypt except for where the Israelis were. This was the plague of exemption, the first initial plague of exemption, because prior to this there was plagues that affected all of Israel, but in this case it only affected the Egyptians. So it's more likely that the Egyptians would have complained to Pharaoh about the preferential treatment that divine forces had been giving the Israelites. They would have been aware that there was something to these Israelis. There was something that was setting them apart. There must be a reason why the plague falls on them and not the Israelis. Of course, it wasn't fair, and it doesn't seem just that the Egyptians would suffer when it was the Pharaoh that was imprisoning them, but they had a choice to go along with Pharaoh or to rebel against him. We know two midwives chose to go against Pharaoh's orders and pretend that the Israelites gave birth faster than they could kill them. It's interesting that Moses said that the Egyptians would kill him and his people if they sacrificed in front of them. If they wanted to do that, they could have done it 400 years ago. But this was a new king coming into the situation, so it makes sense why he was ignorant of the birthing practices of Israelis and of the customs of Egyptians, because the Egyptians weren't his people, so he was wrestling with his ignorance. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go in to Pharaoh and say to him, 'This is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. Let my people go so that they may worship me.' But if you refuse to let them go and keep holding them, then the Lord's hand will bring a severe plague against your livestock in the field, the horses, donkeys, camels, herds, and flocks. But the Lord will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and the livestock of Egypt, so that nothing of all that the Israelites own will die." And the Lord said, "Time said, tomorrow the Lord will do this thing in the land." The Lord did this the next day. All the Egyptian livestock died, but none among the Israelite livestock died. Pharaoh sent messengers who saw that not a single one of the Israelite livestock was dead. But Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he did not let the people go. Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Take handfuls of furnace soot and Moses to throw it toward heaven in the sight of Pharaoh. It will become fine dust over the entire land of Egypt. It will become festering balls on people and animals throughout the land of Egypt." So they took furnace soot and stood before Pharaoh. Moses threw it toward heaven, and it became festering boils on people and animals. The magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boils were on the magicians as well as on all the Egyptians. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not listen to them, as the Lord had told Moses. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Get up early in the morning and present yourself to Pharaoh. Tell him, 'This is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. Let my people go so that they may worship me. For this time I am about to send all my plagues against you, your officials and your people. Then you will know that there is no one like me on the whole earth. But by now I could have stretched out my hand and struck you and your people with a plague, and you would have been obliterated from the earth. However, I have let you live for this purpose, to show you my power and to make my name known on the whole earth. You are still acting arrogantly against my people by not letting them go. Tomorrow at this time I will rain down the worst hail that has ever occurred in Egypt from the day it was founded until now. Therefore, give orders to bring your livestock and all that you have in the field into shelters. Every person and animal that is in the field and not brought inside will die when the hail falls on them. Those among Pharaoh's officials who feared the word of the Lord made their servants and livestock flee to shelters. But those who didn't take to heart the Lord's word left their servants and livestock in the field. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand toward heaven, and let there be hail throughout the land of Egypt on people and animals and every plant of the field in the land of Egypt." So Moses stretched out his staff toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail. Lightning struck the land, and the Lord rained hail on the land of Egypt. The hail, with lightning flashing through it, was so severe that nothing like it had occurred in the land of Egypt since it had become a nation. Throughout the land of Egypt, the hail struck down everything in the field, both people and animals. The hail beat down every plant of the field and shattered every tree in the field. The only place it didn't hail was in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites were. Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron. "I have sinned this time," he said to them. "The Lord is the righteous one, and I and my people are the guilty ones. Make an appeal to the Lord. There has been enough of God's thunder and hail. I will let you go. You don't need to stay any longer." Moses said to him, "When I have left the city, I will spread out my hands to the Lord. The thunder will cease, and there will be no more hail, so that you may know the earth belongs to the Lord. But as for you and your officials, I know that you still do not fear the Lord God. The flax and the barley were destroyed because the barley was ripe and the flax was budding. But the wilderness belt were not destroyed, since they are later crops." Moses left Pharaoh in the city and spread out his hands to the Lord. Then the thunder and hail ceased, and rain no longer poured down on the land. When Pharaoh saw that the rain, hail, and thunder had ceased, he sinned again and hardened his heart, he and his officials. So Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he did not let the Israelites go, as the Lord had said through Moses. Imagine Moses standing before Pharaoh, telling him that all the Egyptians' cattle would die, but the Israelites' cattle wouldn't die. Even though Pharaoh had seen a distinction being made between the Israelites and the Egyptians, it's possible that he was still scoffing, that he still refused to see the truth, or this destruction wasn't enough to wake him up to his need to see more worth in the Israelites than just as slaves to build his pyramids or whatever he used them for. It's interesting that in this case, the magicians had given up trying to mimic what God was capable of. Obviously, they wouldn't want to destroy their own people's livestock, because they would definitely have people looking down on them and the land that the government had given them for free would probably be taken off them in protest. Imagine the shock seeing dust being thrown into the air and land on people's skin and turn into boils. It doesn't say in this case that the Israelis weren't affected by it, but I assume that's what happened. You can imagine the magicians were pretty annoyed at the Pharaoh because he was the reason they were itching and screaming in agony and wishing their pain and suffering could be over. Probably wishing they could die like Job wished at one point. Imagine the Egyptians looking at the sky and wondering if their fields were going to be destroyed by hail. Hopefully the majority of them listened to reason and joined those Egyptians that saw the logic in what Moses was saying and saw how God is powerful and is capable of permitting destruction as well as creation. It's sad that people and animals suffered because of the leader of Egypt's ignorance or refusal to listen to the truth and be gracious towards the Israelites. It's interesting that the Israelites were exempted from being destroyed by hail, even though Pharaoh could see his sin. He still chose to continue, refusing to be obliging. Moses could have belabored the point that Pharaoh was sinning, but he chose to simply cry out to God for relief, just like God brought a cessation of the trouble that Egypt was suffering. He can do the same for our world. He's in the business of working miracles. It wasn't just something that he did in the days of the Bible. It's something that he's continually doing in the ever-passing moment. Don't ever feel like you're alone in your suffering or that it's being ignored by God. Even if he's allowed it to happen to your people for 400 years like the Israelites have suffered, he's always capable of bringing the world to a better place, and he's going to do it in his perfect timing. All suffering and disease will be eliminated by him. All worry, all stress, all fears, all unrighteous anger, all lust and pride, all worship of false gods, everything that's bothering us in this world, all rape and molestation, all abuse of children, all slavery, all the things that are wrong in this world will be done away with in his perfect timing. We just gotta trust in him. He's taking this world to a better place. Sometimes we can be frustrated with his timing, and we don't understand why he takes the time that he does in order to work his miracles. Some people have a better grasp on the way his mind works than I do, but we don't need to know why he does what he does, or why he permits us to have free will, why he permits us to hate each other and destroy each other and mess up this world. We just have to trust that he's capable of delivering us like he's done in the past. He doesn't change. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's always faithful. He's preserving this world. He's the reason why sin is still newsworthy, why a mass murder still gets our attention, because he's the one that is in this world, enlightening us and awakening our consciences and helping us choose right over wrong. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his officials, so that I may do these miraculous signs of mine among them, and so that you may tell, your son and grandson has severely I dealt with the Egyptians and performed miraculous signs among them, and you will know that I am the Lord." So Moses and Aaron went in to Pharaoh and told him, "This is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, that they may worship me. But if you refuse to let my people go, then tomorrow I will bring locusts into your territory. They will cover the surface of the land, so that no one will be able to see the land. They will eat the remainder left to you that escape the hail. They will eat every tree you have growing in the fields. They will fill your houses, all your officials' houses, and all the houses of the Egyptians, something your fathers and grandfathers never saw since the time they occupied the land until today." Then he turned and left Pharaoh's presence. Pharaoh's officials asked him, "How long must this man be a snare to us? Let the man go, so that they may worship the Lord their God. Don't you realize yet that Egypt is devastated?" So Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh. "Go worship the Lord your God," Pharaoh said. "But exactly who will be going?" Moses replied, "We will go with our young and with our old. We will go with our sons and with our daughters, with our flocks and with our herds, because we must hold the Lord's festival." He said to them, "The Lord would have to be with you if I would ever let you and your families go. Look out, you're heading for trouble. No, go, just able-bodied men, worship the Lord, since that's what you want." And they were driven from Pharaoh's presence. The Lord then said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt, and the locusts will come up over it and eat every plant in the land, everything the hail left." So Moses stretched out his hand over the land of Egypt, and the Lord sent an east wind over the land all that day and throughout the night. By morning the east wind had brought in the locusts. The locusts went up over the entire land of Egypt and settled on the whole territory of Egypt. Never before had there been such a large number of locusts, and there never will be again. They covered the surface of the whole land so that the land was black, and they consumed all the plants on the ground and all the fruit on the trees, so that the hail had left. Nothing green was left on the trees or the plants in the field throughout the land of Egypt. Pharaoh urgently sent for Moses and Aaron and said, "I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. Please forgive my sin once more and make an appeal to the Lord your God, so that he will just take this death away from me." Moses left Pharaoh's presence and appealed to the Lord. Then the Lord changed the wind to a strong west wind, and it carried off the locusts and blew them into the Red Sea. Not a single locust was left in all the territory of Egypt. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the Israelites go. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand toward heaven, and there will be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be felt." So Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven, and there was thick darkness throughout the land of Egypt for 3 days. One person could not see another, and for 3 days they did not move from where they were. Yet all the Israelites had light where they lived. Pharaoh summoned Moses and said, "Go worship the Lord. Even your families may go with you. Only your flocks and herds must stay behind." Moses responded, "You must also let us have sacrifices and burnt offerings to prepare for the Lord our God. Even our livestock must go with us. Not a hoof will be left behind, because we will take some of them to worship the Lord our God. We will not know what we will use to worship the Lord until we get there." But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he was unwilling to let them go. Pharaoh said to him, "Leave me. Make sure you never see my face again, for on the day you see my face you will die." "As you have said," Moses replied, "I will never see your face again." Imagine Moses and Aaron standing before Pharaoh, giving Pharaoh that hard word about his ignorance and lack of humility. We can look at Pharaoh and think, wasn't that guy a tough nut? Wasn't he ridiculous to refuse to let the Israelites go? We can be exactly like him, though. We can be very stubborn and pig-headed and refuse to listen to reason and refuse to listen to God's voice guiding us. I've been like that in the past. I don't want to be like that in the present and future. God forgive me for those times when I've acted that way. There's a good kind of stubbornness, but this isn't the kind that is being described here. It's funny that Pharaoh's officials could see the wisdom of what God was saying through Moses and Aaron, but Pharaoh was ignorant. When God was talking about Pharaoh's fathers and grandfathers, he meant the position of Pharaoh, not that actual Pharaoh, because that Pharaoh was a foreigner, so he wasn't connected to the land in the same way that the previous pharaohs were. Obviously, Pharaoh realized that Egypt was devastated, but he was too unyielding in his mindset. I guess because he was worshipped as a god, he found it difficult to accept that any other being could have a higher authority than him, or have more wisdom than him, even though it had been proved to him 10 times over, or 9 times over, that 8 times in a row, that he was off the deep end when it came to governing his people. It's funny that Pharaoh was willing to let Moses go initially with the other men in his tribe, but not the women. I'm wondering what he had planned for the women and children when Moses and the Israelites were away from home. Given his track record of killing babies, it probably wasn't a good plan. Imagine the wind coming over the land and locusts being everywhere, and farmers who'd worked for years, who'd seen their crops flourish for many generations, seeing all their fruits and vegetables die. Imagine the joy that came across their faces when they saw Pharaoh asking for forgiveness and seeing the locusts blowing into the sea. Just as God removed trouble from the Egyptians, he can do the same thing for us. There's been locusts recently in Africa, but it didn't plague the land to the same extent that it did in the time of Moses. It's interesting that God gave the Africans who were affected by the recent plague of locusts the genius idea of turning it into chicken feed. It's possible that the Egyptians might have done the same thing had the locusts not blown into the sea. Imagine the terror on people's faces in Egypt when they were stumbling around, bumping into each other in the dark because they couldn't see. Imagine how shocked they were when they saw the bright light of day suddenly turn into what looked like a never-ending night. After one day of waking up, not knowing what time it was, they probably might have thought that the darkness would continue on forever and they would never see the sun again. It's interesting that there was this bright glowing light where the Israelites were. The sun was present where they were. It's a head trip to consider that there's darkness everywhere except for in one spot. I can imagine all the Egyptians crowding to that spot and wanting to be in the light, because it must have been really annoying bumping into each other and having all these bumps and bruises and being horrified and wondering if they were ever going to see the sun again. It's kind of traumatizing to think of what might have occurred if Pharaoh had continued in his stubbornness. It's interesting how he was only willing to let part of the Israelites' animals go with them out of Egypt. And it's funny how Moses replied that that Pharaoh was right in saying that he wouldn't see his face again, but he wasn't right in the way he thought he was right, because he wasn't going to see his face because he was going to be dead. So God was moving. He's always available to move in our lives. He's the reason our lives improve, why we are allowed to suffer, and while we have relief from suffering, we shouldn't blame him for suffering, no, because we're responsible for suffering by being ignorant.